even though they knew ferocious zombies were all around. The woman in the train carriage screamed at the top of her lungs. She was in the middle of a difficult labor, but the carriage was packed with people, and not a single one dared to step forward to help, because this pregnant woman was also a zombie. It's been 28 years since the zombie virus destroyed the UK. Because of the European military's blockade, the entire British Isles have fallen completely silent. Yet the survivors never gave up hope of staying alive. They built new communities on the islands. This small island was far from the mainland, and the only road connecting it to the mainland only appeared when the tide went out. Therefore, the community has never been invaded by zombies, but resources here were scarce, so the community had to send out small teams to collect supplies on the mainland. On this day, 12-year-old Jack was having his coming-of-age ceremony. His stepfather David would take him off the island to the mainland to hunt zombies. Jack didn't fully understand what this meant, but he knew he wasn't a kid anymore. Later, Jack said goodbye to his sick mother Lisa and followed David to the mainland. There was endless land here, deer he'd never seen before, and zombie. Right then, a slow-moving zombie was wandering along the edge of the woods. It moved sluggishly, but it was still dangerous. David guided Jack, telling him to aim for the neck and shoot. What they didn't know was that another zombie was creeping up on them quietly. Jack shot an arrow and hit the zombie's neck, but before he could feel happy, the other zombie had already rushed right up to them. David reacted quickly and shot the zombie dead, but when he aimed at the next one, he realized it was a child zombie. David hesitated for a split second, which gave the zombie a chance to run away. Little did he know that this moment of softness would get both of them into even bigger danger. After the coming-of-age ceremony ended successfully, the two decided to head back to the island, but on the way, they found a deer that had been gutted. Jack looked up and saw the deer's head nailed to a tree. David beside him immediately realized there was an alpha zombie nearby, the ruler of the zombie horde, huge and highly intelligent. David tensed up right away and took Jack to evacuate to the island. But before they'd taken 2 steps, he suddenly told Jack to freeze, because under a tree in the distance, the alpha and its horde had appeared. Facing these fast-running creatures, the two could only run back into the forest, using arrows to slow the zombies down. But more and more zombies kept catching up, so they had to find a hiding spot quickly. The two hid in an abandoned house. The zombies couldn't find their target, so they just wandered around the area. At last, the two managed to escape the pursuit, but the alpha kept watching them from afar, like a hunter, waiting for the deadliest moment. The two waited until late at night. Suddenly, a light flashed in the distance, catching Jack's attention. He asked David what it was, but David told him not to look that way. There was nothing there. All of a sudden, the house started shaking, and the sound of hurried running came from outside. Countless wild animals were fleeing in panic toward the same direction. Clearly, the alpha had made its move. The two rushed out of the house, running as fast as they could toward the island, but they'd missed low tide, and the water was rising. But they had no other choice. Even if they had to swim, they'd get back to the island. The two struggled to move forward against the current. Behind them, the alpha was charging at them with an eerie speed. Seeing this, David quickly blew a whistle, sending a distress signal to the community's outpost. The outpost shot a shower of arrows, slowing the alpha down. David immediately pressed himself against the gate, proving to the community he wasn't infected. Only then did they finally get back to the community. Later, Jack went home and told his grandfather about the light he'd seen in the distance. But his grandfather asked him, was the light in the southwest direction? It turned out that the community's only doctor, Carl, lived there. 20 years ago, Carl had left the community alone, and since then they'd lost all contact with him. When Jack heard it was a doctor, he was immediately confused. David obviously knew about this too, but he'd never mentioned it to Lisa. So the next day, Jack found David to ask for the truth. Seeing he couldn't hide it anymore, David had to come clean. 2 years earlier, he'd led a team near Carl's camp, but what he saw there were hundreds of headless bodies. Carl had arranged the bodies neatly, like a weird sacrificial ritual. He'd even invited the team to join him. After that, no one dared to go near him again. But Jack didn't react much after hearing this. Instead, he accused David, asking if David was just going to abandon Mom Lisa to be with the neighbor. It turned out that just the day before, Jack had caught David being intimate with the neighbor. David flew into a rage and immediately slapped Jack. But the next second, Jack pulled out a small knife, saying he wanted to cut ties with David. David saw things were getting out of hand, so he told Jack to calm down, promising to tell him the whole truth the next day. But early the next morning, Jack suddenly set the barn on fire. While everyone was busy putting out the fire, he took Lisa and left the island. In his eyes, David was no longer trustworthy. He was going to take Lisa to find Dr. Carl on his own. After some time, Jack and Lisa passed through a field of rapeseed flowers. Lisa suddenly remembered she'd been here before, but she had no idea why she'd come here. Clearly, her condition had gotten worse. Just then, a zombie suddenly appeared. Jack shot it dead with an arrow right away. but he didn't expect more zombies to show up behind him. He could only take Lisa and run. The two found a fast food restaurant, but as soon as they walked in, a smell knocked them out. The gas wasn't natural gas. It was far more dangerous benzene vapor. But the vapor didn't affect the zombies. Instead, it trapped the two in a dead end. Just when things were desperate, someone opened the vent window. He told the two to get down, then shot at the zombies. The bullets ignited the benzene vapor. The shockwave shattered all the zombies instantly. Only 2 people lying on the ground escaped by chance. When they got out of the restaurant, they were shocked to find their rescuer was a Swedish Navy soldier. The soldier introduced himself as Eric. Just 2 hours earlier, his team's patrol boat had hit a reef. The whole team had to come ashore to survive. But as soon as they landed, they ran into the Alpha and its horde. Even though the team had a hot weapon each, they still couldn't hold off the swarming zombies. In the end, Eric was the only one left alive. Since Eric didn't know the area, he decided to go with Jack. Later, with Jack leading the way, and Eric carrying the sick Lisa on his back, they set off on their journey to find the doctor. After that, they stopped to rest in an open meadow, but Lisa suddenly stood up, saying she knew where the doctor was. Then she walked toward one direction, and Jack and Eric followed her. Just then, a strange sound suddenly rang out. Right after that, a swarm of rats scurried out from under a train car. Lisa followed the sound into the car, and saw a shocking sight. A pregnant zombie was struggling to give birth at that moment. Lisa reached out her hands to the zombie, and the pregnant zombie actually took her hands in response. What they were seeing was beyond anyone's imagination, but there was something even more shocking to come. The zombie actually gave birth to a human baby. Eric's eyes were filled with wariness. The zombies could reproduce too. Then the 28 years of blockade they'd maintained would be completely meaningless. At that moment, the female zombie suddenly attacked. Eric quickly shot her dead, then aimed his weapon at the baby. But the next second, a huge hand suddenly grabbed him. Amid screams and the sound of tearing flesh, the Alpha jumped down, holding Eric's head in its hand. Jack and Lisa were so scared they ran as fast as they could, but the Alpha didn't chase them right away. It looked at the pregnant zombie lying on the ground, then let out a heart-wrenching roar, and chased after the two. Jack shot an arrow and hit the Alpha's weak spot, but the Alpha wasn't affected at all. It roared and charged at Jack, as if it would tear him apart in the next second. Just when it was life or death, an arrow hit the Alpha's body. The Alpha immediately lost the ability to move. The person who'd shot the arrow was none other than Dr. Carl. 20 years of surviving alone had taught him many survival skills. He'd covered his whole body in iodine. To zombies, he smelled like walking poop. Then he'd coated the arrow with anesthetic. Even the Alpha could be taken down with just one shot, but he didn't finish off the Alpha, because if the Alpha died, the zombie horde in this area would run wild, and unpredictability was the biggest threat to survival. Later, Carl took Eric's head and led the two back to his camp, but what they saw there left them stunned. Around the outside of Carl's camp, there were pillars made of human bones everywhere. According to him, this was the best way to keep zombies away. At the center of the camp, a towering tower of thousands of skulls stood. Carl told everyone that each skull once held a unique soul. For the past 20 years, he collected corpses everywhere, just to let the deceased rest in peace. With that said, Carl tossed Eric's head into the incinerator. Then he used hot water to strip off the remaining flesh. From that day on, the skull tower had one more resident. Later, Carl examined the baby and found she wasn't infected, but the baby needed breast milk urgently. With only water, she'd survive at most 3 days. Carl noticed Lisa's condition. Only then did he realize there was another patient. That night, Carl examined Lisa. He tried to jog her memory, but it didn't work. Carl thus concluded that Lisa had late-stage cancer. It turned out that 2 years earlier, David had brought Lisa here. Back then, Carl had already diagnosed her with cancer. Now Lisa's frequent memory loss only confirmed his diagnosis. It was only then that Jack realized David had hidden Lisa's cancer from him, just to let him have a happy childhood. Now that the truth was in front of Jack, he could only accept that Lisa was going to die. Lisa was worried Jack would be too heartbroken, so she worked with Carl to knock him out with an anesthetic. Then, she accepted the euthanasia Carl had prepared for her. When Carl came back from outside, only a clean white skull was left of Lisa. Jack found the best spot for her, on the memorial monument. Not long after, the two escorted the baby back to the community, but they were chased by the Alpha along the way. Everyone hurried to hide in the basement, but the enraged Alpha grabbed someone right away. Just as Carl was about to have his head torn off, Jack quickly pulled out an anesthetic needle and made the Alpha lose mobility again. Later, David got the news that Jack had returned to the community. He rushed out of the gate like a madman, but he couldn't find Jack anywhere. At that moment, he'd lost his wife and his son. All he received was the baby girl Jack had left for him, along with a letter. Jack had named the baby Lisa, hoping David would pass on the love he'd had for his wife to this little girl. As for Jack himself, he would follow Carl's example. building a resting place for all the victims of this post-apocalyptic world.